On September 18, 2025, Federal Plaza in New York City became the epicenter of a dramatic standoff that would capture the nation's attention. The plaza, usually bustling with commuters and city workers, was transformed into a battleground for civil rights and government authority. Protesters and Democratic lawmakers gathered in force, their voices echoing off the stone walls as they demanded access to ICE offices. Their goal was clear: to advocate for the release of detainees and to shine a spotlight on what they called unjust immigration practices. Among the crowd were prominent figures: NYC Comptroller Brad Lander, 2 state senators and 9 assembly members, who lent their political weight, turning what began as a grassroots protest into a high-stakes political showdown. The demonstration quickly escalated as protesters surged toward the building's entrance, chanting and waving signs. In response, ICE officers locked down all access points, determined to keep the crowd at bay. Tensions soared as the Federal Protective Service called in the NYPD for backup, and a tense standoff unfolded between demonstrators and law enforcement. The air was thick with urgency and defiance. The result was swift and dramatic: 71 arrests, including Comptroller Lander and several lawmakers, as police moved in to disperse the crowd and restore order. This confrontation was about more than just immigration policy. It became a direct challenge to federal authority, raising questions about the limits of protest and the power of government agencies. The day's events set the stage for a fierce political and legal battle, as activists and lawmakers vowed to continue their fight in the courts and in the public eye. The clash at Federal Plaza would reverberate far beyond New York City, sparking debates across the country about civil disobedience, government power, and the future of immigration policy. The next day, the Department of Homeland Security fired back with an unprecedented move. DHS released names and criminal histories of several detainees, reframing the protest as a defense of dangerous criminals. The agency's language was pointed, calling the detainees the worst of the worst. This public disclosure broke with privacy norms, signaling a new combative approach. Lawmakers and activists suddenly found themselves on the defensive, forced to answer for the backgrounds of those they sought to help. The government's tactics shifted the debate from detention conditions to public safety. The national conversation on immigration grew even more polarized. DHS didn't just generalize, they went a step further, publicly naming 6 specific detainees to justify their controversial actions and to shape the public narrative. Vladimir Kuca, an Albanian national, was highlighted as a convicted drug trafficker who had recently been transferred from FBI custody, underscoring the seriousness of his offenses. David Abrego Alvarado, a Salvadoran citizen, was described as an alleged MS-13 gang member with a prior DWI conviction, who had previously been deported but re-entered the country illegally, raising concerns about repeat offenders. Juan Hernandez Saravia, also from El Salvador, was identified as another MS-13 member, with a record including multiple DUIs, weapons convictions, and repeated violations of immigration law. Juan Enrique Peña Soriano, a Dominican national, was arrested for drug possession, adding to the list of those with criminal backgrounds. Askar Aslanovich Kutov, a Russian citizen, had overstayed his visa and was convicted of possessing stolen property, further illustrating the range of offenses among the detainees. Miguel Ramirez from Mexico was convicted of resisting arrest, rounding out the group DHS labeled as particularly dangerous. By presenting these cases, DHS aimed to demonstrate that their detention priorities were focused on protecting public safety, not simply targeting people for their immigration status. The message was clear: these were not just ordinary migrants but individuals with significant and sometimes violent criminal records, according to officials. The public release of these details only intensified the controversy, fueling heated debates about immigration enforcement and public safety across the country. Lawmakers insisted their goal was oversight and humane treatment, not blanket release. They emphasized that their mission was to ensure accountability and uphold the values of justice, rather than simply opening the doors to everyone in detention. Many stressed that their actions were rooted in a deep concern for civil liberties and the well-being of vulnerable individuals. They argued for transparency and due process, challenging what they saw as an opaque and punitive system. Lawmakers demanded clear answers and public scrutiny, believing that only through openness could the system be improved. They called for regular reporting and independent oversight to prevent abuses and restore public trust. Their protest, they claimed, was a last resort, after ICE ignored formal requests for access. Frustrated by repeated denials and a lack of cooperation, they felt compelled to take their concerns to the streets and the media, hoping to spark a broader conversation about government accountability. DHS countered that it was enforcing laws and protecting the public from dangerous individuals. Officials insisted that their primary responsibility was to uphold national security and prevent threats, arguing that their actions were necessary to maintain order and safety. The agency accused politicians of recklessly advocating for the release of gang members and felons. They warned that such actions could undermine law enforcement efforts and put communities at risk, framing the debate as a matter of public safety versus political grandstanding. Both sides framed their actions as a moral duty, one to protect rights, the other to ensure safety. The debate grew increasingly heated, with each side accusing the other of ignoring fundamental American values. The standoff became a battle over who gets to define justice and security. As tensions rose, the nation watched closely, aware that the outcome could reshape the balance between liberty and order. The lines between advocacy and law enforcement had never been sharper, leaving the public to grapple with difficult questions about the future of justice in America. The Federal Plaza protest exposed the deep rift in America's immigration debate. DHS's release of detainee records set a new precedent, one that raised questions about privacy and political retaliation. The clash forced a reckoning over the roles of local officials in federal enforcement. Who decides how immigration laws are applied in our communities? The events in New York underscored the complexity and high stakes of immigration policy. As both sides dig in, the nation is left to grapple with the balance between security and compassion. The September 2025 standoff will be remembered as a defining moment in this ongoing struggle.